My name is Layla Gibson, and I'm 34 years old. 6 years ago, my mother called me 4 days before Thanksgiving and said 9 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about family. Don't come home this year. Meredith doesn't need your energy. No explanation beyond that, no apology, no acknowledgement that I'd already bought a $380 plane ticket that couldn't be refunded. Just a door slammed shut on 28 years of trying to belong to people who never wanted me in the first place. I spent that Thanksgiving alone at a restaurant in Boston, watching happy families pass dishes and share laughter, while I sat at a corner table pushing cold turkey around my plate, trying not to cry in public. I failed at that last part. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have possibly known, was that the couple at the next table would become the family I'd always deserved. I didn't know that the woman with silver hair and kind eyes who approached my table that night would one day become legally my mother. I didn't know that 6 years later, she and her husband would be introduced at my wedding as the parents of the bride, while my biological parents stood watching from the back row, uninvited, finally understanding that they'd been replaced in every way that mattered. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that phone call. Let me take you back to the moment everything changed. November 19th, 4 days before Thanksgiving. I was in my apartment in Cambridge, surrounded by half-packed bags and the smell of the pumpkin candle I'd lit to get myself in the holiday spirit. I'd been planning this trip home to Connecticut for weeks. My plane ticket was purchased, my PTO was approved, I even bought a nice bottle of wine to bring for dinner. My mother's name flashed on my phone screen. I smiled as I answered. Hey, Mom, I was just about to finish packing. What's up? Layla. Her voice was flat, distant. I need to tell you something. My stomach dropped. That tone never meant anything good. What's wrong? Is Dad okay? Your father is fine. A pause. A breath. Listen, don't come home this year. Meredith is pregnant again, and she doesn't need your energy around. I actually laughed. I thought she was joking. What do you mean, my energy? You know how you get. My mother's voice hardened. Always asking questions, always making things difficult. Meredith is having a hard pregnancy and she doesn't need the stress. Mom, I haven't even talked to Meredith in months. How could I possibly stress her out? Exactly. Let's keep it that way. I gripped the phone tighter. I already bought my ticket. It's non-refundable. Then I guess you should have checked with us first. The line went dead. I stood there for a long moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to silence. Then I called my father. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice cautious, careful. He already knew. Dad, did Mom tell you? She mentioned it, yes. And you're okay with this? You don't think maybe I should be allowed to spend Thanksgiving with my own family? A long pause. I could hear the TV in the background. A football game, probably. I could picture him in his recliner, rubbing his forehead the way he always did when he wanted a conversation to end. You know how your mother gets, Layla. She's just trying to keep the peace. By excluding me. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Dad? Tell me. Silence. 5 seconds? 10? I could hear him breathing. I think it's better if you listen to your mother this year. We can figure things out later. Something inside me went quiet. Not sad, not angry, just empty. Okay, Dad. Layla, don't be like, I said okay. I hung up. He didn't call back. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my useless plane ticket. $380 I'd never see again. But that wasn't what hurt. Money comes and goes. What hurt was the realization that had been building for 28 years, finally crystallizing into something I couldn't ignore anymore. I had never been part of that family, not really. I'd just been convenient, useful, tolerable, as long as I stayed small enough, quiet enough, invisible enough to not disrupt the spotlight that had always belonged to my sister. I wasn't going to sit in my apartment feeling sorry for myself. I wasn't going to let them turn me into the sad, dramatic mess they had always accused me of being. If I was going to eat Thanksgiving dinner alone, I was going to do it somewhere with actual food, with light, with life. I grabbed my coat and went looking for a restaurant that was still open. Before I continue, drop your city in the comments. I want to know where this story is reaching today. And if you've ever been the family member everyone blames for causing drama just because you asked to be treated fairly, type me in the comments. This story is for you. I should tell you who I was back then, who I'd worked so hard to become despite everything. I was 28 years old and a corporate attorney at one of the top law firms in Boston. I specialized in mergers and acquisitions, the kind of complex deals that required 70-hour weeks and an ability to function on 4 hours of sleep. My salary was $290,000 a year. I was the youngest associate on track for partner. I was also the first person in my family to graduate from college, let alone law school. Boston College, then BC Law, then a clerkship with the federal judge that launched my career. I'd done it all on scholarships, loans, and sheer determination, because my parents had made it clear from the beginning that they couldn't help me financially. Couldn't was the word they used, but they always seemed to find money from Meredith. My sister was 3 years older and had decided in her early 20s that she wanted to be a lifestyle influencer, a blogger, someone who posted pretty pictures of her breakfast and got paid for it. My parents thought this was a brilliant career choice. They bought her cameras, they funded her website, they paid for her trips to create content in Santorini and Tulum and Bali. When I told them I wanted to be a lawyer, my father nodded once. "That's a lot of school. Are you sure you can handle it?" That was the extent of his enthusiasm. I handled it. I handled everything. That was my role in the family. Lila can handle it. Lila's responsible. Lila doesn't need help. But they needed mine. It started 5 years before that fateful Thanksgiving. My father called me during my second year of law school. His voice was tight with embarrassment. "Lila, we're in a bit of a bind. I got laid off and unemployment doesn't cover the rent. Could you help us out? Just until I find something new?" I transferred $1,800 that night, 3 months of their rent, money I'd saved from my summer associate position, money I'd planned to use for textbooks and bar exam prep courses. Just this once, I told myself. They're my parents, of course I'd help. But just this once became a pattern. When Meredith got married, I paid for the down payment on her wedding gift, a new car, $12,000 that I put on a payment plan because I didn't have that kind of cash sitting around as a junior associate drowning in student loans. When Meredith's lifestyle blog failed to take off, she needed a loan to start a small business selling handmade candles. $8,000. She promised to pay me back as soon as the business turned a profit. The business closed after 6 months. She never paid me back. She never even acknowledged the debt. When my parents' furnace died in the middle of January, I covered the replacement, $4,200. When my mother needed dental work that insurance wouldn't cover, I handled it, $2,200. Over 6 years, I quietly transferred $47,000 to my family. I never asked for gratitude. I never expected parades. I just thought that maybe if I was helpful enough, generous enough, reliable enough, they would finally see me as something other than the difficult daughter who asked too many questions. I kept records. I don't know why exactly. Maybe some part of me needed to see it in black and white, needed evidence that I wasn't crazy, that the weight I was carrying was real. Every transfer, every date, every amount. 6 years of data in a Google Drive folder I told myself was just for taxes. But I think I always knew I'd need proof someday. Proof that I wasn't the monster they made me out to be. They had no idea I'd been documenting everything for years. They had no idea that the quiet, reliable, handle-everything Lila had receipts. To understand why that phone call broke me, you need to understand the pattern, the decades of small cuts that bled so slowly I didn't notice I was dying from them. Let me take you back to my 13th birthday. I'd asked for a telescope. I was obsessed with space that year. I'd checked out every astronomy book from the school library, spent hours in the backyard trying to identify constellations. A telescope was all I wanted. Meredith's birthday was 2 weeks before mine. She'd asked for a new wardrobe and a trip to New York City to see a Broadway show. On the morning of my birthday, I ran downstairs to find a small wrapped package on the kitchen table. It was a glow-in-the-dark star sticker set, the kind you could buy at the dollar store for $3. My mother smiled. "We'll do something special later, sweetheart. Maybe ice cream after dinner." We didn't. She forgot by afternoon. Dad came home late from work and didn't mention my birthday at all. 2 weeks earlier, Meredith had gotten her new wardrobe, her Broadway tickets, and a surprise party with 20 of her friends. I asked my mother about it once. Why Meredith got so much more? She looked at me with genuine confusion. Meredith needs more support. Her dreams are bigger. You've always been so practical, Lila, so self-sufficient. It's one of your best qualities. I was 13 years old. I didn't know how to explain that self-sufficiency wasn't a personality trait, it was a survival mechanism. That pattern repeated for 15 years. My law school graduation should have been one of the proudest moments of my life. Top 10% of my class, law review, a federal clerkship already secured. I walked across that stage knowing I'd earned every bit of it through my own effort. My parents arrived 40 minutes late. They'd been helping Meredith with a crisis, some drama with her Instagram algorithm that apparently couldn't wait. We missed the actual ceremony, my father said, but we caught the end. Congratulations, sweetie. No photos except a blurry one in the parking lot. No celebration dinner. My mother kept checking her phone because Meredith was texting her about engagement metrics. Compare that to Meredith's wedding a year later. My parents flew the whole family to a resort in the Berkshires. 3-day celebration. My father gave a 20-minute toast about how proud he was of his beautiful daughter. At my law school graduation, he'd said 4 words. Good job out there. But the moment that should have warned me, the moment that should have made me see the truth years earlier, happened when Meredith had her first baby. I found out about the baby shower through Instagram. Meredith posted photos of the event, a beautifully decorated living room full of pink balloons, a table covered in gifts, my mother beaming beside her. I scrolled through the images, counting the faces, looking for myself. I wasn't there, because I hadn't been invited. I called my mother that night, keeping my voice calm, measured. I didn't want to sound dramatic. Hey, Mom, I saw the photos from Meredith's shower. It looked beautiful. Oh, it was wonderful. She sounded distracted, already moving on to the next thing. I didn't realize it was happening. I would have taken time off work to be there. Silence. Then, oh, well, Meredith thought it might be better if you weren't there. I felt like I'd been punched. Why? You know how you get, Lila. She said she didn't want you making it about yourself. Making it about myself. I repeated the words slowly, trying to understand them. I would have just shown up and given her a gift, Mom, like a normal person at a baby shower. My mother's voice cooled. See, this is exactly what she means. You're already getting defensive. Let's not make this a bigger deal than it needs to be. I swallowed every word I wanted to say. I sent Meredith a $500 gift card to a baby boutique. I never received a thank you note. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the phone call 3 years later, the one that finally broke me. Don't come home this year. Meredith doesn't need your energy. I'd been asking to be treated like a member of my own family for 28 years, and their answer, the final answer, was that my presence was so toxic that my pregnant sister couldn't even be in the same house with me for asking one question 2 years earlier about why I wasn't invited to a baby shower. That was my crime. That was the drama I caused. On Thanksgiving Day, I made the mistake of checking Instagram. Meredith had posted a photo. The whole family around the dining table. Mom, Dad, Meredith, her husband Tyler, their 2-year-old daughter in a tiny turkey sweater. Everyone was smiling. The caption read, "So grateful for my family. These are the people who matter most." I zoomed in on the photo, counted the place settings. 5 chairs for 5 people. There was no empty seat where I should have been. They hadn't just excluded me, they'd erased me, like I'd never existed at all. I sat in my apartment staring at that photo for a long time. The tears came eventually, but underneath the tears, something else was building. A cold, hard clarity I'd never felt before. For 28 years, I'd been shrinking myself to fit into their version of family. I'd been apologizing for having feelings. I'd been paying $47,000 for the privilege of being called difficult. And what had it gotten me? A dollar store sticker set? A parking lot photo? An Instagram post that counted me as nothing? That's when I stopped crying and started getting dressed. If I was going to eat Thanksgiving alone, I was going to do it with dignity. Beacon Hill Tavern was one of those old Boston institutions. Dark wood, brass fixtures, the kind of place that still had cloth napkins and candles on every table. More importantly, it was one of the few restaurants in the city that stayed open on Thanksgiving. When I pushed through the door, the warmth hit me like a wave. The smell of roasted turkey and fresh bread, the soft clink of glasses, and everywhere, families. Couples with grandparents, parents with children, groups of friends who laughed like they'd known each other forever. The hostess looked at me with barely concealed pity. Just one? Just one. She led me to a tiny two-top in the corner, squeezed between the kitchen door and a large family that took up 3 tables pushed together. I could have touched their chairs if I reached out. I sat down, opened the menu, and tried to look like being alone was a choice. The family next to me was celebrating hard, an older couple at the head of the table, probably in their late 60s, a middle-aged man with his wife and 2 kids, a younger woman around my age with a warm laugh. 3 generations, easy, joy. They passed dishes without asking. They interrupted each other in the way only people who truly love each other can. The older man told a terrible joke. Everyone groaned and laughed anyway. I watched them out of the corner of my eye and felt something crack open in my chest. This is what family is supposed to look like. My turkey arrived. Golden skin and cranberry sauce, perfect mashed potatoes. I couldn't taste any of it. I just sat there, pushing food around my plate, trying not to think about my own family gathered around their table in Connecticut, laughing and passing the gravy without a single thought about the daughter they'd discarded. The tears came before I could stop them. I turned my face toward the window, grabbed my napkin, pressed it to my eyes, tried to disappear the way I always did. "Honey," I froze. A woman's voice, warm, concerned. "Are you okay?" I looked up. The older woman from the family next to me was standing beside my table. Silver hair, kind eyes, a face that looked like it had spent a lifetime listening to people. She was looking at me like I mattered. "I'm fine." The words came out automatically, just allergies. She raised one eyebrow, not judging, just knowing. Allergies don't usually make people cry into their mashed potatoes on Thanksgiving. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. That obvious? Only to someone who's paying attention. She had a gentle voice, but there was steel underneath. "I'm Margaret." "Layla." "Well, Layla." Margaret glanced back at her family, then at me. "No one should eat alone on this day. Why don't you come join us?" I shook my head. "Oh no, I couldn't. I don't want to intrude." "You're not intruding. I'm inviting," she smiled. "There's a difference." "I really appreciate it, but—" "My husband tells terrible jokes," she continued as if I hadn't spoken, "and my son Nathan keeps starting debates about architecture that nobody wants to hear. You might as well come suffer with us." The older man, her husband, waved from the table. "She won't take no for an answer, trust me. 44 years and I've never won an argument." The younger woman grinned. "He's not wrong." I looked at my cold turkey, my empty table, my napkin still damp with tears. Then I looked at Margaret Lewis and her kind eyes and her family that somehow had room for a stranger. "Okay," I heard myself say, "if you're sure." She put her hand on my shoulder. "I'm sure. Come on, we just opened another bottle of wine and there's way too much pie." I stood on shaky legs and followed her to the table. I had no idea that this single moment, this small act of kindness from a woman I'd never met, was about to change the entire trajectory of my life. They made room for me like I'd always been there. Someone pulled up a chair. Someone else handed me a plate. Before I could even sit down, I had a glass of wine in my hand and a warm roll in front of me. "I'm Harold," the older man said, shaking my hand. "This is my wife Margaret, our son Nathan, his sister Chloe, Chloe's husband Derek, and their kids Sophie and James." "Hi," I gave an awkward little wave. "I'm Layla. Thank you so much for—" "What do you do, Layla?" Nathan asked, passing me the mashed potatoes. He had dark hair, kind eyes, the kind of face that looked like it smiled easily. "I'm a lawyer, corporate law, mergers and acquisitions." "That's impressive," Chloe said. "I can barely read my own lease agreement." "Mom, what's a merger?" Sophie asked. She looked about 7. "It's when 2 companies become one company, like when you and James share your toys and become one toy collection." "We don't share toys," James said firmly. He was maybe 5. "Sophie takes all the good ones." Everyone laughed, not at anyone, with each other. Margaret caught my eye from across the table. "How are you doing, dear? Really?" Something about her directness made me want to be honest. "Better," I said quietly. "This is really nice, thank you." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're welcome here." For the first time in my life, I believed it. After the main course, while the men argued about football and Chloe chased her kids around the restaurant, Margaret moved to the chair beside mine. "Do you want to tell me why you're really here alone?" I hesitated. The truth felt too pathetic to say out loud. But Margaret waited, patient, no judgment in her eyes. My mom called me 4 days ago, I finally said. Told me not to come home for Thanksgiving. My sister's pregnant, and apparently I caused too much drama. Drama? I once asked why I wasn't invited to her baby shower. Apparently that makes me difficult. Margaret nodded slowly. I see. It's fine, I added quickly. I mean, it's not fine, but it's not fine. Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. Can I tell you something I learned in 40 years of teaching high school English? I blinked. You were a teacher? Literature and composition, she smiled. I've seen every kind of family dysfunction you can imagine. Kids who came to class crying because of what happened at home, kids who acted out because they'd never been shown what love looks like. And I learned something important. What? The people who accuse you of causing drama are usually the ones creating it. They just need someone to blame. The words hit me like a physical force. You're not the problem, Lila. Margaret put her hand over mine. You never were. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. Those were the words I needed to hear my entire life, and they came from a stranger at a restaurant table, not from the family that should have said them 28 years ago. Before I left that night, Margaret pressed something in my hand. A small card, cream-colored, with neat handwriting. Her name, a phone number, an address in Brookline. Sunday dinners at our house, she said. Every week. You're welcome anytime. I mean it. I looked at the card, then at this woman who owed me nothing, but had offered me everything. Thank you. She pulled me into a hug. Family isn't blood, Lila. It's showing up. I didn't go to Sunday dinner the next week, or the week after. It felt too forward, too strange, too much like imposing on someone else's family. But Margaret called, just to check in, she said, just to see how I was doing. By early December, I finally accepted the invitation. That first Sunday, I stood on the Lewis family's porch in Brookline for 5 full minutes before I knocked. The house was a beautiful Victorian with a wraparound porch and lights in every window. It looked like the kind of place where good things happened. Margaret opened the door before I could change my mind. There you are. She pulled me into a hug. We saved you a seat. That was the first of many Sundays. Over the next 2 years, I became a regular at the Lewis dinner table. Harold taught me to play chess, badly. Margaret showed me how to make her grandmother's apple pie. Chloe's kids started calling me Aunt Lila without anyone telling them to. And Nathan. Nathan and I became friends. Real friends. The kind who texted random thoughts at midnight, argued about books and movies, and sat next to each other at dinner without anyone arranging it. I didn't hear from my biological family once during those 2 years. Not a call, not a text, not even a Christmas card. For the first time in my life, I stopped noticing. Because for the first time, I wasn't performing for love. I wasn't shrinking myself to fit into someone else's expectations. I was just existing, just being, just belonging. For the first time in 28 years, I understood what family was supposed to feel like, and I knew I could never go back to settling for less. The question came on a spring afternoon, 3 years after that first Thanksgiving. Margaret and I were sitting on her back porch watching Harold attempt to start the grill, while Nathan offered unhelpful advice. The garden was blooming, birds fought over the feeder. It was the kind of peaceful scene I'd never known existed until I found these people. Have you ever heard of adult adoption? Margaret asked. I turned to look at her. What? Adult adoption. She took a sip of her iced tea. It's a legal process. A consenting adult can be formally adopted by another family, creates a legal parent-child relationship, new birth certificate, new legal next of kin, everything. My heart was pounding. That's a real thing? Very real. She met my eyes. Harold and I have talked about it. We'd like to adopt you, Lila, if you'd want that. I couldn't speak. The words lodged in my throat like stones. You don't have to decide now, Margaret said quickly. It's a big decision, but we've thought of you as our daughter since that first Thanksgiving. We were just waiting for you to be ready. I looked at Harold struggling with the grill, at Nathan laughing beside him, at the house that had become my home, at this woman who'd seen me crying alone and decided I was worth saving. Yes, my voice cracked. Yes, I want that. I want that more than anything. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Then, let's make it official. The adoption process took 6 months. Paperwork, court appearances, legal filings, but with a lawyer for a daughter, the process was smoother than most. When the judge signed the final order, I legally became Lila Lewis. I had a new birth certificate, new legal parents, a new family in every way that mattered. I called Margaret that night. "Mom," I said, testing the word. She started crying. "Yes, sweetheart?" "It fits. The word fits." "It always did," she said. "We were just waiting for you to see it." Meanwhile, the Gibsons had no idea anything had changed. I'd stopped calling them on birthdays and holidays. I'd stopped sending Christmas gifts. When my mother sent rare, passive-aggressive texts, I left them on read or responded with single words: "Fine. Okay. Sure." They assumed I was being dramatic, as usual. They assumed I'd come around eventually. That's what I'd always done, after all. Lila could be counted on to swallow her feelings and fall back in line. They had no idea I'd already left. They had no idea I had a new family, a new name, a new life that didn't include them at all. Meredith posted on Instagram that Thanksgiving, 3 years after she'd gotten me excluded. "Thanksgiving with the people who actually show up." Heart emoji. I looked at the photo. Same table, same people. Still no empty chair for me. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt nothing at all. 2 years after the adoption, Nathan proposed. He did it at Beacon Hill Tavern, the same restaurant where his mother had invited a crying stranger to join their table, the same place where my life had changed forever. "This feels circular," I said, sliding into the booth. "That's the point." Nathan was nervous. I could tell by the way he kept adjusting his napkin. "I wanted to bring you back to where it started." "Where what started?" He reached across the table and took my hand. "Everything." I looked at this man who'd been my friend first, my confidant second, who'd watched me heal from years of family trauma without ever trying to fix me or rush me. "I love you," he said simply. "I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you." He pulled out a small velvet box. "Lila Lewis, will you marry me?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. He slipped the ring on my finger, the restaurant erupted in applause, and in the corner booth, Margaret and Harold sat beaming, champagne already poured, like they'd known all along. When we sent out the wedding invitations, the line I dreaded writing was already decided. Parents of the bride, Harold and Margaret Lewis. No hesitation, no guilt, just truth. But the Gibsons found out anyway. Someone always talks. A distant cousin who'd heard through the family grapevine that Lila Gibson was getting married and hadn't invited her own parents. My mother started calling, 5 times a day sometimes. I let every call go to voicemail. Finally, a text. "Why didn't you tell us you were getting married? We're your family. Call me back immediately." I read it twice. Then I deleted it and blocked her number. They thought my silence meant I'd given up. They had no idea it meant I was finally free, and they had no idea what was waiting for them at my wedding. Cape Cod in October is something special. The leaves had turned gold and crimson. The vineyard we'd chosen stretched across rolling hills, rows of grapevines glowing in the afternoon sun. Everything was decorated with white roses and autumn greenery. 120 guests, a string quartet playing softly, the kind of wedding I'd never dared to dream about when I was the difficult daughter nobody wanted. In the bridal suite, I stood before a full-length mirror while Margaret adjusted my veil. "You look beautiful," she said softly, "absolutely beautiful." I looked at my reflection. The woman looking back at me was calmer, stronger, happier than the girl who'd sat alone in a restaurant 6 years ago. That girl hadn't believed she deserved love. This woman knew better. On the vanity beside me sat the wedding program. I picked it up, reading the line that had once seemed impossible. Parents of the bride, Harold and Margaret Lewis. Margaret noticed me looking. Nervous? A little, I admitted. Not about marrying Nathan, about what might happen. I'd hired security for the wedding, a quiet precaution. After my mother's texts, after the voicemails I hadn't listened to, I knew there was a chance the Gibsons would try something. Margaret put her hands on my shoulders. "Whatever happens today, you have a family who chose you. We will always choose you. Remember that." I hugged her tight. "I love you, Mom." It was the 100th time I'd called her that. It felt more natural every time. "I love you too, sweetheart." She pulled back, eyes glistening. "Now let's go get you married." Through the window, I could see guests taking their seats. Nathan was already at the altar, looking nervous and handsome in his gray suit. It was time. The ceremony was everything I'd dreamed of. Nathan waiting at the end of the aisle with tears in his eyes. Harold walking me toward him, steady and proud, the father I'd always deserved. The vows we'd written ourselves, words about chosen family and second chances that made half the guests cry. When Nathan slipped the ring on my finger and the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, something clicked into place, like the last piece of a puzzle I'd been trying to solve my entire life. The reception was in full swing when the security guard found me. "Mrs. Lewis?" He appeared at my elbow, discreet and professional. "There are 3 people at the entrance. They claim to be your parents, both of them, and a younger woman." I'd expected this. Part of me had been waiting for it all day. Nathan appeared beside me. "What's going on?" "My biological family is here, all 3 of them." His expression hardened. "I'll have them removed." "No." I took his hand. I considered my options. I could have security escort them away. I could pretend they weren't there. I could avoid this confrontation entirely. But something in me wanted them to see, to witness, to understand exactly what they'd lost. "Let them in," I told the guard, "but don't seat them with family. Put them at the back, far back." "Are you sure?" Nathan asked. "I'm sure." The guard nodded and disappeared. A few minutes later, I saw them. Karen and Dennis Gibson standing awkwardly at the edge of the reception, looking around at 100 strangers celebrating their daughter's wedding, their daughter who hadn't spoken to them in 5 years. Meredith was with them, holding her phone, probably documenting everything for Instagram. The MC was about to make an announcement. Perfect timing. "If I could have everyone's attention, please?" The room quieted. Conversations trailed off, champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. "Before we continue the celebration, I'd like to introduce some very special people." I watched my biological family from across the room. Jaren was craning her neck, trying to see. Dennis stood behind her, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. Meredith was still on her phone. They had no idea what was coming. "Please join me in welcoming the parents of the bride." Karen straightened up. I could see her preparing to acknowledge the introduction, to accept recognition she believed was rightfully hers. "Harold and Margaret Lewis." The room erupted in applause. Harold and Margaret stood from the head table, beaming, waving to the guests. People cheered. Someone whistled. The photographer captured the moment. And across the room, my mother's face went white. I watched it happen in slow motion. The confusion, the disbelief. The moment she read the program someone handed her and saw those words printed clearly. "Parents of the bride, Harold and Margaret Lewis, the family who chose her." Karen grabbed Dennis's arm. "What does that mean? What did he just say?" Dennis looked stunned. I don't know." Meredith had finally put down her phone. She was staring at the head table where 2 strangers were being celebrated as my parents. Karen pushed through the crowd before I could react. She reached me just as the applause was dying down. Her face flushed, her eyes wild. "What is going on?" Her voice was a harsh whisper. "Who are those people?" I kept my voice calm. "My parents. You are my mother." "You were." I met her gaze evenly. "I was adopted 4 years ago, legally. Harold and Margaret Lewis are my parents now, in every way that matters." Karen actually staggered backward. You can't replace us." "I didn't replace you, Mom." I felt Nathan move closer, a solid presence at my side. "You abandoned me first, remember? Meredith didn't need my energy. That was years ago. And in those years, you never called, never texted, never asked if I was alive." I kept my voice steady. "So no, you don't get to show up now and act like you have a claim on me." Meredith appeared beside our mother, phone finally pocketed. "This is ridiculous, Lila. You're causing a scene." "I'm not causing anything." I looked at my sister, really looked at her for the first time in years. "You're the one who crashed my wedding uninvited." "We're your family." "No." I shook my head slowly. "You're not. Not anymore." And then my father spoke. She's right. Everyone turned to look at Dennis Gibson. He'd barely said a word in my presence for years, the enabler, the one who always deferred to my mother to keep the peace. But now he was crying, tears rolling down his cheeks, his voice cracked and broken. She's right, Karen. We did this. I did this. Karen turned to him. Dennis, what are you... I knew, his voice trembled. I knew how you treated her, how Meredith treated her. I watched it happen for 28 years, and I never said a word. I just wanted peace. I just wanted everyone to be happy. He looked at me, really looked at me. But you were never happy, were you? And I pretended not to notice because it was easier. Something cracked in my chest. Not healing, just recognition of an old wound. I know, Dad, I said quietly. I'm sorry, he was sobbing now. I'm so sorry, Lila. You deserved better. You deserved a father who stood up for you. Karen grabbed his arm. Dennis, stop. You're embarrassing us. No, he shook her off. I'm telling the truth. For once in my life, I'm telling the truth. The room had gone silent, 100 guests watching this moment unfold. Harold Lewis stepped forward. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. I think it's time for you folks to leave. Karen spun to face him. Who do you think you are? I'm her father. Harold's voice was steady, certain, legally and in every way that matters. You stole our daughter. No, ma'am, Harold shook his head. We didn't steal anything. You gave her away. We just picked up what you threw out. Karen flinched like she'd been slapped. 6 years ago, Harold continued, this young woman was sitting alone in a restaurant on Thanksgiving because her own family told her she wasn't welcome. My wife invited her to our table. We fed her. We listened to her. We treated her like she mattered. He looked at Karen with something like pity. Do you know what she told us that night? She said she couldn't remember the last time she felt wanted by her own family. 28 years old, and she couldn't remember ever feeling like she belonged. The silence was deafening. We didn't steal your daughter. We just showed her what family is supposed to look like. The rest was her choice. He nodded to the security guards, who had been standing discreetly nearby. Please escort these people out. Karen started to protest, but I held up my hand. Wait. Everyone froze. I walked toward my biological family, stopped an arm's length away. I need you to understand something. Karen's chin lifted. What? I don't hate you. Whatever she'd expected, that wasn't it. I don't hate any of you. I've made peace with who you are. You're not villains. You're just people who couldn't love me the way I needed to be loved. People who chose comfort over fairness. People who made one daughter invisible so the other could shine. Dennis was still crying. Meredith looked like she wanted to disappear. But I've also made peace with who I am. I stood straighter. I'm someone who deserves to be chosen, not as a backup, not as an afterthought, not as the acceptable sacrifice when someone else's comfort is at stake. Chosen first. I looked at each of them in turn. You didn't choose me. They did. I gestured to the Lewis family, and I choose them. I let that sink in. I'm not erasing you from my history. I'm just not giving you a seat at my table anymore. That's not revenge. It's not drama. It's just the natural consequence of your choices. I nodded to security. Goodbye, Mom, Dad, Meredith. As they were escorted out, my biological father turned back one last time. His face was wet with tears. I'm proud of you, he said. I should have said it years ago, but I'm proud of you. I nodded. I know, Dad. I know. And then they were gone. The room was silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping, then another person, then the whole room. Not for the drama, for me. Margaret appeared at my side, pulling me into a hug. You did it, she whispered. You stood up for yourself. I did. I held her tight. I finally did. Nathan wrapped his arms around both of us. Now, can we get back to celebrating? I've been waiting 6 years to call you my wife. I laughed, wiping my eyes. Yes, let's celebrate. The DJ started the music, the dancing began, and for the rest of the night, I let myself be completely, unapologetically happy. That was 3 years ago. Today, I sit in the living room of our house in Brookline, watching our daughter Lily play with the blocks Harold made for her by hand. She's 2 years old, with Nathan's dark hair and my stubborn chin. Her full name is Lily Margaret Lewis, a tribute to the grandmother who saved my life by simply paying attention. Through the window, I can see Margaret in the garden planting tomatoes while Harold pretends to help. They come over every Sunday, or we go to them. Either way, we never miss a week. I made partner at my firm last year. Nathan's architecture practice is thriving. We're building a life together in every sense of the word. As for the Gibsons, I hear things sometimes, through the family grapevine, through distant cousins who still try to broker reconciliation. My mother sent a letter a year after the wedding. I read it once. It was 3 pages of explaining why everything had been my fault, how I'd always been too sensitive, how she'd only been trying to protect Meredith. She ended by saying she forgave me for embarrassing her at the wedding. I threw it away. Meredith's influencer career never recovered from the whispered scandal. Apparently being the sister who got someone disowned isn't great for the brand. Last I heard, she was working at a boutique somewhere, still married, still posting occasionally to her dwindling followers. But my father surprised me. 6 months after the wedding, a letter arrived. Handwritten, shaky, nothing like the formal communication I'd expected. "Layla," it began, "I don't expect you to read this, I don't expect you to respond, but I needed to say this somewhere other than inside my own head. I'm sorry, not for your mother, not for Meredith, for me, for every time I watched you be hurt and said nothing, for every time I chose peace over my own daughter, for 30 years of cowardice. You were always the best of us. I knew it then, I know it now, and I'm sorry I never had the courage to say it when it mattered. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see you, and I'm proud of the woman you became, despite us. Your father, Dennis." I read that letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. But I didn't throw it away either. Some wounds are too deep to fully heal. Some relationships are too broken to rebuild. But acknowledgement matters. Truth matters. And finally, after 30 years, my father told the truth. Thanksgiving is next week. The Lewis house is already in preparation. Margaret is obsessing over the pie crust. Harold is testing terrible new jokes on anyone who will listen. Chloe's kids are fighting over who gets to sit next to Lily. And I'm sitting at the table where I've belonged for 6 years now, watching my daughter play, surrounded by people who chose me. Not because they had to, not because of blood or obligation, because they wanted to. That's what family means. I spent 28 years trying to earn a place at a table that was never meant for me. I spent 28 years shrinking myself, silencing myself, apologizing for existing. And then a stranger in a restaurant said 4 words that changed everything. "Come join us." If you're watching this and you've been the scapegoat of your family, if you've been told you're too much or too sensitive or always causing drama just because you dared to ask for basic respect, I want you to know something. It's not you. It never was. You deserve to be chosen, not as a backup, not as a last resort, not as the acceptable sacrifice. Chosen first, chosen fully, chosen without conditions. Family isn't blood. Family isn't obligation. Family isn't the people who share your DNA but treat you like a burden. Family is the people who see you crying alone at a restaurant table and pull up a chair. The people who open their Sunday dinners and their hearts and their legal documents to make you theirs. The people who show up. If the people who are supposed to love you can't do that, you have the right to build your own family. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to be happy. That's not revenge. That's not drama. That's just living your life without people who never deserved a seat at your table. I found my family in the most unexpected place, and I hope with all my heart that you find yours too. You deserve it. Thank you so much for being here until the very end. If my story touched you in any way, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. It really helps more people find these stories. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with your own family? Did you find your chosen family somewhere unexpected? Share your experience in the comments. I read every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who's still waiting for love from people who will never give it, share it with them. Until next time, remember, you deserve to be chosen.